5 years had passed since the day Marcus Cole became a prince, and the galaxy had transformed beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, humanity's first Dreadnought-class warship, built with Valanthi technology freely shared. The massive vessel was larger than most space stations, carrying enough firepower to challenge any fleet in the galaxy. Below him, Earth glittered like a precious jewel against the velvet darkness of space. The planet that had once seemed so small and insignificant now stood at the center of a new galactic alliance. Ships from 30 different species orbited alongside human vessels, their crews working together in ways that would have seemed impossible just 5 years ago. This was the Human Valanthi Alliance, a coalition built not on conquest or fear, but on the simple principles that had driven Marcus into that wreckage so long ago. No one gets left behind. No one dies alone. Everyone deserves help when they need it. These words had become the motto of the Alliance, and they had attracted species from across the galaxy who were tired of the old ways, tired of empires that measured worth by power alone. Marcus heard footsteps behind him and smiled without turning around. He knew those footsteps better than any others in the universe. "Looking at Earth again, brother?" Princess Alindra asked as she joined him at the viewport. She had changed in the past 5 years, growing from a scared young princess into a fierce leader in her own right. She had become humanity's greatest advocate among the elder species, fighting for human rights and human dignity with passion that surprised everyone who knew her. "I am remembering," Marcus replied. "Remembering what I used to dream about when I was just a cargo hauler, flying alone through the outer verge." "What did you dream about?" Marcus laughed softly. "I dreamed about mattering. I dreamed about making a difference. I dreamed about proving that humans were worth something." He turned to look at his sister. "I never imagined it would happen like this. I never imagined I would have a family on another world, or that my people would stand among the stars as equals." Alindra smiled warmly. "And yet here you are, Prince Marcus of the Valanthi Dominion, hero of the Verge Run, champion of humanity, and the most stubborn person my mother has ever met." That last part made Marcus laugh out loud. His relationship with Queen Sithara had become famous across the galaxy. Unlike every other person in her court, Marcus was not afraid to disagree with the Eternal Queen. He challenged her decisions, questioned her logic, and demanded that she consider mercy alongside power. And to everyone's amazement, she loved it. After 9,000 years of being surrounded by people who agreed with everything she said, Sithara had finally found someone who treated her like a person instead of a god. Their arguments were legendary, shaking the walls of the palace and terrifying the servants, but they always ended with respect and sometimes even laughter. "Speaking of mother," Alindra continued, "she asks when you are coming home to Volantos. The founding festival is approaching and she refuses to celebrate without you. Tell her I will be there," Marcus promised. "Someone has to keep her humble." Alindra shook her head with amusement. Only Marcus could talk about keeping an immortal queen humble and actually mean it. A chime from the ship's communication system interrupted their conversation, and a young human officer appeared on the screen. "Prince Marcus, we are receiving a distress signal from a transport ship in Sector 9. They report that they are under attack by raiders." Marcus felt his heart quicken with familiar determination. 5 years as a prince had not changed who he was inside. He was still the man who could not ignore a cry for help. "How far away are they?" he asked. 2 hours at maximum speed, sir. Set course immediately," Marcus commanded, "and send word to any Alliance vessels in the area. We are going to help those people." The officer saluted and disappeared from the screen. Alindra watched her brother with pride shining in her silver eyes. This was why humanity had become so beloved across the galaxy. When other species heard a distress call, They calculated the risks and rewards before responding. Humans simply went to help. It was irrational. It was inefficient. It was beautiful. You know, Alindra said thoughtfully, Mother once told me that she adopted you not just to reward your courage, but because she saw something in humanity that the galaxy desperately needed. What was that? Hope, Alindra replied. She had lived for 9,000 years and watched countless civilizations rise and fall. She had seen every kind of wisdom and every kind of folly. But humans were different. Humans still believed that tomorrow could be better than today. Humans still fought for things that had no logical benefit. She placed her hand on his shoulder. She said that humans reminded her of what the Volanti used to be long ago, before they became so old and tired. She adopted you because she wanted your fire to spread through the galaxy and wake everyone up. Marcus considered her words as the Defiance changed course toward the distress signal. He thought about all the changes that had happened in 5 years. Humans now served on ships from dozens of species, teaching them the simple power of compassion. Human doctors had developed new medical techniques that saved millions of alien lives. Human artists had created works that made ancient beings weep with emotions they had forgotten they could feel. And throughout the galaxy, the story of Marcus Cole was told and retold, not as a tale of power or conquest, but as proof that small acts of kindness could change everything. Other species have begun to adopt the Cole doctrine for themselves, looking for brave and compassionate individuals to elevate regardless of their origin. The old hierarchies were crumbling, replaced by a new understanding that worth was measured not by age or strength, but by the willingness to help others. I used to think I was nobody, Marcus said quietly. I used to think that one human could never make a difference in a galaxy so vast and ancient. He turned to face his sister with determination burning in his eyes. I was wrong. Every person can make a difference. Every act of courage matters. Every moment of compassion sends ripples across the stars. He looked back at Earth one final time. The elder species forgot this truth, but humans never did. We have always known that the smallest person can change the course of history. We have always believed that kindness is stronger than cruelty, and hope is more powerful than despair. The Defiance jumped to hyperspace, racing toward people who needed help. And Marcus Cole, cargo hauler, prince, brother, and symbol of humanity's rise, went to do what humans had always done best. He went to help, because in the end, that was the gift humanity had given the galaxy. Not weapons or technology or ancient wisdom, just the simple, powerful truth that everyone deserves a chance. Everyone deserves compassion, and no one should ever face the darkness alone. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter as the Human-Volanthi alliance spread across the galaxy, and a new age of hope began. And it all started because one man refused to leave a scared girl behind. The first month at Celestine Academy was designed to break students, to push them beyond their limits and force them to discover what they were truly made of. For Mira Chun, it was the hardest thing she had ever experienced. Every morning began before the sun rose over the crystal spires. Every night ended long after the stars had filled the sky. In between, there was nothing but tests and training and the constant weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. The curriculum at Celestine covered everything a future leader might need to know. Combat was taught by veterans of 100 wars. Science was taught by minds that had unlocked the secrets of the universe. Survival training took place on hostile worlds where a single mistake could mean Death Mirror struggled in almost every area in combat class. She faced opponents who could move faster than her eyes could follow. A Vrelican student threw her across the training room with a single swipe of his arm. A Thadari girl paralyzed her with venom that took 3 hours to wear off. A massive Thaloxian simply sat on her until the instructor called the match. Her combat scores were the lowest in the class. and the instructors made no effort to hide their disappointment. The human lacks basic defensive capabilities. One report stated, "Recommend remedial training or dismissal in psionic development class." Mira sat in silence while her classmates moved objects with their minds and communicated through thought. Humans had no psychic abilities at all, and the instructor eventually stopped calling on her entirely. "There is no point," he told her. "You cannot develop what does not exist in advanced mathematics." She performed adequately, but adequately was not good enough at Celestine. Students here were expected to excel, and merely passing was considered a failure. The other students watched her struggle with a mixture of satisfaction and contempt. She was proof that humans did not belong among the galaxy's elite, and they enjoyed watching her confirm their beliefs every single day. But Mira did not give up. She did not complain. She did not ask for help or mercy or special treatment. She simply worked harder. She woke up 2 hours before everyone else to practice combat forms. She stayed up late studying subjects that confused her. She filled notebook after notebook with observations and questions and ideas, and then the survival training exercise happened. And everything began to change. The class was transported to a volcanic moon called Infernus 7. A hellscape of molten rock and toxic gases where the temperature could kill an unprotected being in minutes. Each team was given basic equipment and told to survive for 3 days until extraction. Myra's team consisted of herself, 2 Thalassian students named Vrek and Korath, and a Kethari girl named Dalara. None of them wanted to work with the human, but they had no choice on the first day. Their equipment failed. A volcanic vent opened beneath their shelter and destroyed their communication gear, their water purifiers, and their emergency beacon. They were stranded on a hostile world with no way to call for help. Vrek and Korath immediately began to panic. Dalara's silver skin turned a sickly gray color as fear overwhelmed her. They looked at each other with wide eyes and trembling limbs, unable to decide what to do. Myra did not panic. Myra looked at the wreckage around them and began to think, "We need to stay calm," she said, and her voice was steady and clear. "Panic will kill us faster than this moon will. What do you know about survival?" Vrek demanded. "You are just a human." "I know that we have 6 days of water if we ration carefully," Myra replied. "I know that the extraction team will come looking for us when we miss our check-in. I know that we can build a beacon from the parts of our destroyed equipment if we work together." "That is impossible," Dalara said. "The components are incompatible." "Then we will make them compatible," Myra said. "Show me what we have to work with." For the next 2 days, Mira worked without rest. She had never built a communication beacon before, but she had spent her childhood taking things apart and putting them back together. She had fixed cars and computers and broken toys. She understood how machines worked, even machines she had never seen before. She asked questions constantly. She learned how Thalassian technology processed signals. She studied how Kethari crystals could amplify power. She combined knowledge from 3 different species and created something entirely new on the 3rd day. She completed the beacon. It was ugly and crude and held together with melted rock and desperate hope. But it worked. But they still had another problem. They were running out of water, and the extraction team might take days to find them. "We need to move," Myra said. "I saw a ridge to the north that should be cooler. We can conserve water if we are not constantly fighting the heat. How will the rescue team find us if we move?" Korath asked. "I will leave markers," Myra said. "I memorized the star positions last night. I can navigate using the constellations and leave a trail they can follow." The others stared at her in disbelief. Using stars for navigation was an ancient technique that most species had abandoned thousands of years ago. The idea that this primitive human knew how to do it seemed impossible, but they had no better options. So they followed her for 3 more days. Mira led her team across the volcanic wasteland. She rationed their water with mathematical precision. giving each person exactly what they needed to survive and no more. She found shelter in lava tubes and safe paths through fields of toxic vents. She kept them alive through sheer determination and endless problem-solving. When the rescue team finally found them on the 6th day, they were exhausted and dehydrated, but alive. Every other team that had lost their equipment had been rescued within hours after activating emergency protocols. Myra's team had survived longer than anyone thought possible. The instructor, a grizzled Vrex veteran named Commander Dex, pulled Mira aside after the debriefing. He was a massive creature, covered in scars from battles that had been fought before Myra's grandparents were born. "Where did you learn field command?" he asked her. Myra shrugged. "Camping trips with my dad. Sometimes equipment breaks and you have to figure things out. You improvise." Commander Dex stared at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his eyes. It was the first time anyone at the academy had looked at her with something other than contempt or pity. "Improvise," he repeated. "Yes, I suppose you do." Word of what had happened on Infernus 7 spread quickly through the academy. Students who had ignored Myra before now watched her with new interest. Instructors who had dismissed her began to pay attention, and then came the theoretical physics examination. Professor Kethvolen was the oldest teacher at Celestin, a being so ancient that no one remembered what species he had originally been. He had spent his life studying the mysteries of fold space navigation, the technology that allowed ships to cross the galaxy in moments. For centuries, a paradox had haunted his work. The mathematics of fold space contained an error that no one could solve. It was a puzzle that had defeated the greatest minds in the galaxy. The examination asked students to attempt the paradox, not to solve it, but to demonstrate their understanding of why it was unsolvable. Myra solved it. Solution was crude and ugly, written in mathematical notation that made the professor wince. It ignored elegant proofs and beautiful theories in favor of brute force logic and simple arithmetic, but it worked. The paradox was solved. Centuries of frustration were ended by a 17-year-old human girl with a worn notebook and a pencil. When Professor Kethvolen asked her how she had done it, Mira gave him the same simple answer she had given Commander Dex. "I did not know it was supposed to be impossible." The professor sat in silence for a very long time after that, and across the academy, whispers began to spread. The human was either the luckiest creature in the galaxy, or she was something else entirely, something that no one had expected, something that no one understood, something that was just getting started. The grand arena of Celestine Academy had witnessed countless battles over its 12,000 years of existence. Champions had risen and fallen on its crystalline floor. Legends had been born beneath its soaring dome. But no one who gathered there on that cold morning could have predicted what they were about to see. Dervax Kale stood in the center of the arena, his scales glowing with the deep blue light of his warrior lineage. He was the greatest fighter the Academy had produced in generations, undefeated in 3 years of competition. Heir to a dynasty that had shaped the history of the galaxy. Across from him stood Mira Chun, small and soft and terribly fragile. The challenge had been issued 3 days earlier. Torvax had grown tired of hearing whispers about the human girl, tired of watching students who should have known better speak her name with something approaching respect. She had solved a math problem and survived a camping trip, and suddenly people thought she was specially would remind everyone what true strength looked like. The rules of a formal duel were simple. The fight would continue until one combatant yielded or was unable to continue. There were no weapons allowed, only natural abilities. Medical teams stood ready to intervene if a life was in danger when Torvax had issued the challenge. Every student and teacher at the academy had told Mira to refuse. Even Commander Dex, who had begun to see something in her, advised her to find another way. "He will kill you," Solara said, and for the first time there was genuine concern in her voice. "You cannot beat him." "No human could." "I know," Myra replied. And why are you doing this?" Mira was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was calm and certain, because some things are more important than winning. Now, as the crowd filled the arena to capacity, Mira stood across from her opponent and felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. The betting odds gave her a 0.003% chance of victory. Most people expected the fight to last less than 30 seconds. Headmaster Volantra stepped forward to officiate. Her ancient eyes moved between the two combatants, and for just a moment, they lingered on the small human girl. "This is a formal duel," Volantra announced. "It will be fought with honor. It will end when one fighter yields or cannot continue. Do both combatants understand?" "I understand," Torvax said, and his voice was full of confidence. "I understand," Myra said, and her voice did not shake. "Then begin." Torvax moved like lightning. One moment he was standing still, and the next moment his fist was buried in Myra's stomach. The impact lifted her off her feet and sent her flying across the arena. She hit the ground hard, and the crowd gasped at the sound of the impact. Myra lay still for a moment, and the medical team prepared to intervene. Then she stood up. Her face was pale, and she was clearly in pain. But she raised her fists and faced her opponent once more. Torvax blinked in surprise. He had expected her to yield. Instead, she was asking for more. He attacked again, faster this time. His forearms blurred as he struck her from multiple angles. She tried to block, but she was too slow. His blows hammered into her body, and she fell again. The crowd waited for her to stay down. She stood up. "Yield," Torvax commanded. "You cannot win this fight." There is no shame in accepting defeat. Myra spat blood onto the crystalline floor and shook her head. "No." He hit her again. This time, the impact shattered something inside her, and she felt her ribs crack. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It burned through her body like fire and stole the breath from her lungs. She fell, and for a long moment, she could not move. The medical team stepped forward, but Mira raised one hand to stop them, and then, slowly, painfully, impossibly, she stood up again. The arena had gone completely silent. No one was whispering anymore. No one was laughing. Every eye was fixed on the small human girl, who refused to stay down. Torvax felt something cold settle in his chest, something he had never felt before in any fight. It took him a moment to recognize it as uncertainty. "Why do you keep getting up?" he demanded. "You know you cannot beat me. Your body is broken. You should be unconscious. Why do you not yield?" Myra looked at him with blood running down her face, and she smiled. "Because I am human," she said. "And humans do not stay down." He hit her again. She fell again. She stood up again. He broke her arm. She stood up. He knocked her down so hard that the crystal floor cracked beneath her. She stood up each time she rose. The crowd grew more and more quiet. Students who had mocked her could not look away. Teachers who had dismissed her watched with something approaching odd 12 times. Torvax Kale knocked Myra Chun to the ground. 12 times she stood back up by the 8th rise. Torvax had stopped attacking immediately. He would hit her, and then he would wait. And each time he became more and more certain that she would not get up. And each time he was wrong. By the 12th rise, his hands were shaking. Mira could barely see. Blood had filled her eyes, and pain had clouded her mind. She did not know how she was still standing. Every part of her body screamed at her to stop, to give up, to let the darkness take her, somewhere deep inside, in a place that humans had carried with them since they first stood upright on a hostile world millions of years ago. There was a voice that said one simple thing: get up. So she got up and she raised her fists and she waited for the next blow. Torvax stared at her. And in that moment, he understood something that changed him forever. He had spent his entire life believing that strength meant being able to destroy your enemies. He had trained every day to become faster and more powerful. He had won every fight through sheer physical dominance, but this broken, bleeding, barely conscious human girl had shown him a different kind of strength. The strength to keep fighting when you knew you could not win. The strength to stand up when every part of you wanted to give up. The strength to refuse to break even when your body was shattered. "What are you?" He whispered. "Human." She answered. "We do not stay down." And Torvax Kale, undefeated champion of Celestin Academy, heir to the greatest warrior dynasty in the galaxy, did something he had never done in his entire life. He yielded. The arena exploded into chaos. Students shouted and screamed. Teachers argued about what they had just witnessed. The medical team rushed forward to collect Myra's broken body, but Torvax just stood there, staring at the place where she had stood, trying to understand what had just happened. He had not lost because she was stronger. He had not lost because she was faster. He had not lost because she had outfought him in any way. He had lost because she had shown him that true strength had nothing to do with winning. True strength was getting up one more time in the medical bay. The doctors worked frantically to repair Myra's broken body. They set her bones and sealed her wounds and pumped her full of medications that should have taken days to work. But when they checked on her the next morning, her bones were already knitting back together. Her tissue was regenerating at a rate they had never seen before. Her body was healing itself with a speed that defied everything they knew about biology. How is this possible? One doctor asked another doctor, older and wiser, pulled up the medical files on humans that had been compiled since first contact. He read through them slowly, and his face grew more and more troubled. "Humans evolved on a death world," he said quietly. "They were not the strongest or the fastest. They survived because they could take damage that would kill other species and keep going. They are persistent predators. They do not win by being better. They win by being unbreakable." The doctors looked at each other, and for the first time, they began to understand what they were dealing with. And in her bed, unconscious and healing, Mara Chun smiled in her sleep. She had not won the fight, but she had won something far more important. She had shown the galaxy what humans were made of. The message spread across the galaxy like a wildfire burning through dry grass. Within hours of the duel, recordings had reached every major world in the Galactic Concord. Within days, billions of beings had watched a small human girl stand up 12 times against an opponent who should have destroyed her intelligence. Agencies that had never paid attention to Earth suddenly began pulling every file they could find. Military commanders who had dismissed humans as primitives started asking uncomfortable questions. Scientists who had considered the species unremarkable began digging through research that had been ignored for years. What they found changed everything. The first reports came from the xenobiologists, the scientists who studied alien life forms. They had always known that Earth was classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that most species would not survive a single day on its surface. But they had assumed that humans were simply lucky, that they had managed to evolve despite their environment rather than because of it. They were wrong. Earth's gravity was crushing, nearly twice as strong as the galactic average. Humans had evolved dense bones and powerful muscles just to walk upright. Every human who came into space was already stronger than they appeared, adapted to a weight that would cripple other species. Earth's atmosphere was toxic. It was filled with oxygen, a gas so reactive that it was used as rocket fuel by most civilizations. Humans breathed this poison every moment of their lives. Their bodies had learned to use it, to burn it for energy, to turn a deadly chemical into the source of their survival. But the gravity and the atmosphere were just the beginning. The reports from the historians were even more disturbing. They had studied human history, expecting to find a simple story of primitive beings slowly climbing towards civilization. Instead, they found something that made their blood run cold. Humans had survived 5 mass extinction events. Asteroids had struck their world and killed almost everything alive. Ice ages had frozen their planet from pole to pole. Plagues had swept through their populations and killed millions. And each time, humans had refused to die more than that. They had thrived. They had domesticated wolves, one of the deadliest predators on their planet, by simply refusing to give up. Over thousands of years, they had turned these killing machines into loyal companions who would die to protect them. They had done the same to horses and cattle and countless other species. They had bent nature itself to their will through patience and persistence. They had invented weapons capable of destroying their entire world, had built thousands of these weapons, had come within moments of using them, and then had chosen not to. They had looked at the power to end their own existence and had decided that survival was more important than victory. They had waged wars that lasted for generations, crossing oceans in wooden ships to fight enemies they had never seen. They had climbed mountains that should have killed them simply because the mountains existed. They had explored every corner of their deadly world and claimed it as their own. The military analysts were the most frightened of all. They ran simulations based on the human capacity for endurance. They calculated how long a human soldier could fight compared to soldiers from other species. They modeled what would happen if humanity ever decided to go to war with the Concord. The results were terrifying. A human soldier could march for days without rest. Their bodies would continue functioning long after other species would have collapsed. They could survive wounds that would kill a Relican warrior instantly. They could fight through pain that would paralyze a Cathari operative. They could keep going and going and going until either they won or they were physically destroyed. But the most dangerous thing about humans was not their endurance, it was their adaptability. Humans were template learners. They did not specialize the way other species did. Instead, they watched and copied and combined. They took the best ideas from everyone they met and synthesized them into something new at Celestine Academy. Myra Chun had been doing exactly that. She had watched the Relicants and learned their efficient movements. She had studied the Cathari and absorbed their logical thinking. She had observed the Thalassians and understood their emotional intelligence. She had taken something from every species she encountered. She was not becoming like them. She was becoming the best of all of them. Headmaster Valanthra called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Concord's Education Council. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered in a secure chamber to hear what she had to say. Their faces displayed confusion and concern as they waited for her to speak. 3 years ago, we welcomed humanity into the Concord, Valanthra began. We believed we were being generous. We thought we were helping a primitive species take its first steps towards civilization. We assumed that we had nothing to fear from creatures so small and fragile and limited. She paused, and her ancient eyes swept across the assembled leaders. We were wrong. She activated a display that showed Myra's academic records, her combat footage, her survival training results. She showed them the theoretical physics paradox that had been solved in an afternoon. She showed them the beacon built from scraps on a volcanic moon. She showed them the 12 times a broken girl had stood up in the face of certain defeat. We thought we were teaching her, Valanthra said quietly. We believed she was here to learn from us, to absorb our wisdom and carry it back to her primitive world. She turned off the display and faced the council directly. We were wrong. She has been studying us. Every moment she has spent at this academy, she has been watching and learning and adapting. She is not becoming like us. She is becoming better than us. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded that humans be expelled from Celestine immediately. Others called for restrictions on human travel. A few suggested more extreme measures, but one voice cut through the noise. A calm and thoughtful voice that belonged to the oldest member of the council. What do you suggest we do, Headmaster? Valanthra was quiet for a long moment before she answered. I do not know, she admitted. Humans are unlike anything we have encountered before. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the smartest. They do not have the best technology or the most resources. Then why are you afraid of them? Someone demanded. Valanthra turned to face the speaker, and for the first time, emotion flickered across her ancient face. Because they do not know how to give up, she said. Every other species in this galaxy has limits. We reach a point where we accept defeat and move on. But humans do not have that limit. They will keep getting up, keep trying, keep adapting, until they either succeed or they are completely destroyed. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, and I am not certain they can be destroyed. The council sat in stunned silence as the weight of her words settled over them, somewhere across the galaxy. On the crystalline world of Vethorin, a 17-year-old human girl was recovering from her injuries and preparing to return to her classes. She did not know about the emergency meeting or the fear that was spreading through the highest levels of galactic government. She only knew that she had more to learn, and she intended to learn everything. 3 years had passed since Myra Chun had first stepped off that shuttle and walked through the gates of Celestin Academy. 3 years of learning and growing and becoming something that no one had expected. 3 years that had changed not just her life, but the future of the entire galaxy. The graduation ceremony was held in the Grand Arena, the same place where she had stood up 12 times against Torvax Kale. The crystalline floor had been repaired long ago, but everyone who gathered there could still feel the echo of what had happened on that day. Myra stood at the front of her class, dressed in the formal robes of a Celestin graduate. She was taller now, stronger, more confident. The girl who had arrived alone and afraid was gone, replaced by a young woman who carried herself with quiet certainty. She was not alone anymore. Behind her stood Torvax Kale, the Relican warrior who had become her closest friend. The duel that should have destroyed her had created an unbreakable bond between them. He had learned from her that true strength came from getting back up, and she had learned from him that even the mightiest warriors could change. Beside Torvax stood Solara, the Kethari roommate who had once watched Myra with contempt. She had seen something in the human girl that she could not explain, something that had drawn her in despite her best efforts to stay distant. Now they were sisters in everything but blood. There were others too, students from a dozen species who had come to respect and admire the small human who refused to break. They had formed a circle around her, a community that crossed every boundary the galaxy had ever known. Headmaster Valanthra stepped forward to address the graduating class. Her ancient eyes found Myra in the crowd and lingered there for a moment. Celestin Academy has stood for 12,000 years. Valanthra began. In that time, we have trained leaders and scientists and warriors from every corner of the galaxy. We have shaped the future of civilizations. We have produced champions who have changed the course of history. She paused, and her gaze swept across the assembled students and dignitaries. But I do not believe we have ever produced a graduate quite like Myra Chun. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone had seen the recordings. But hearing the headmaster speak these words made them feel more real somehow. When she arrived here, we dismissed her as a curiosity, a political admission to satisfy her species' new membership in the Concord. We expected her to fail quietly and return home. We believed she had nothing to teach us. Valanthra's voice carried across the arena, reaching every ear. We were wrong. In 3 years, Myra Chun has risen to the top of every ranking we measure. She has solved problems that defeated our greatest minds. She has forged alliances between species that have been enemies for millennia. She has shown us that strength is not about power or speed or natural weapons. The headmaster turned to face Myra directly. Strength is about getting back up. Strength is about refusing to accept defeat. Strength is about becoming more than you were yesterday. The arena erupted in applause. Students cheered. Dignitaries nodded with respect. Even those who had feared what Mira represented could not deny what she had accomplished. After the ceremony, Mira was approached by representatives from every major institution in the Concord. The Vrelican Military Command offered her a position as a strategic advisor. The Gathari Science Council wanted her to lead a research division. The Galactic Senate invited her to serve as humanity's voice in their chambers. She declined them all. Instead, she stepped onto the stage and asked for silence. The crowd grew quiet, curious about what she would say. 3 years ago, I came to this academy as the first human to ever walk through these gates, Myra said. I was alone and afraid and surrounded by people who wanted me to fail. I did not know if I could survive, let alone succeed. She looked out at the sea of faces, alien and human alike, but I learned something here. Something more important than physics or combat or survival techniques. I learned that the boundaries between species are not walls. They are bridges waiting to be built. I learned that every civilization has something to teach and something to learn. I learned that we are all stronger together than we could ever be apart. She took a deep breath before continuing. That is why I am not accepting any of your offers. I am returning to Earth to build something new, an academy like this one, but different. A place where humans and aliens will learn side by side from their first day. A place where we will combine the best of every species and create something the galaxy has never seen. The crowd murmured with surprise and interest. You built your institutions to make the best of what you already were. Myra continued. Humans build institutions to become what we have not imagined yet. That is the difference. That is why we keep getting up. We are not finished. We are never finished. We are always becoming something more. She smiled. That same small smile she had worn on her first day. And now we want to help you become something more too. The applause that followed was different from before. It was not just respect or admiration. It was hope, a sense that something new was beginning. Something that would change everything. As Mira walked toward the shuttle that would take her home, Torvax fell into step beside her. I am coming with you, he said. I know, she replied. My family will disown me. They will say I have betrayed my heritage. They will never understand why I am choosing to follow a human. Myra looked up at her massive friend and smiled. Then we will build a new family, she said. One that chooses each other instead of being born into obligation. Torvax nodded slowly, and something like peace settled over his features. Yes, he agreed. I think I would like that. Behind them, Solara and a dozen other graduates from a dozen species gathered their belongings and prepared to join them. They were giving up everything they knew to follow a dream that did not exist yet. They were taking a leap of faith into a future that no one could predict, but they had learned from Mira-chan that faith was sometimes all you needed. The shuttle lifted off from Vetharan, carrying the first members of what would become the most influential academy in galactic history. In the years to come, it would produce leaders and scientists and artists who would reshape every aspect of civilization. It would prove that cooperation was more powerful than competition. It would show that getting back up was not a human trait, but a choice that anyone could make. But that was all in the future for now. There was just a small ship carrying a group of friends toward a distant blue planet, where a new chapter was about to begin back on Vetharan. In the grand arena where Mira had stood up 12 times, workers began construction on a new statue. It showed a small human girl, bloodied and broken, raising her fists one more time. Her face was determined, her stance was defiant, and her eyes were fixed on something in the distance that only she could see. Plaque at the base of the statue bore only 3 simple words. She stood up and across the galaxy. On 100 worlds, Young beings of every species looked at that image and felt something stir inside them. They did not know what the future would hold. They did not know what challenges awaited them. But they knew one thing for certain: if a small human girl could stand up 12 times against impossible odds, then maybe they could stand up too. Maybe anyone could. Maybe that was the whole point. And somewhere in the void between stars, heading home to build a dream, Myra-chan looked out at the passing galaxies and thought about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. She was not afraid. She was not uncertain. She was ready because she was human, and humans do not stay down.